onto the belly, tops of the feet down if you can. Have one block near you. You may or may not need that. So we're coming into a Sphinx position. This is one of my favorite postures for kind of repairing, so to speak, putting the low back together after a person has folded forward quite a bit. And it's nice on its own as well. So the start for your Sphinx is just to let yourself kind of splay out along the ground, belly down, and make sure that you can relax all the muscles around the hips and the spine. So this is going to be felt a fair amount in the low back, and that is in fact where it's designed to impact. But sometimes things are just a little too much. So let yourself just rest here, take a few breaths, make sure you can fully exhale without gripping or holding yourself in any certain position. If you just can't release here, you will not lift higher, and you might have to engage a little bit of the muscles around the low back and hips to tuck the tailbone just a little bit, to drop it a little more toward the heels. So if needed, stay here and take those actions. If you're able to lift a little higher, you're going to go just a little bit at a time. So the key here is to leave the hips and low back relaxed if you at all can. That means you're going to get to impact the connective tissue in addition to just the muscles. So with your hands about shoulder width apart and a bit in front of your shoulders as well, you're going to ever so slowly start to pull your elbows in. They're making their way toward a position where they're stacked underneath the shoulders. You may or may not get that far. So this creates a fairly obvious shape of why it is called the Sphinx position. But for a lot of people, this creates a lot of holding. It's too much compression in the low back. It's just too much. So let the elbows stay in front of you or out wider if needed, so the rib cage can take some of your body's weight instead of all on the arms and shoulders and having that deeper bend in the low back. So wherever you are, you might find that it's your arms and shoulders holding your weight that creates a little challenge for you, and that's where a block comes in. It's not the most perfect prop. If you had something soft and cushy, that would be good, but you can kind of wedge one of these guys in here underneath the rib cage if you're able to get up higher, but you still would like something else to hold a bit of your body weight. You can try that out. So once we're here, we're just going to be here. Again, make sure you can completely relax yourself. You can completely exhale. There's no holding. So a yin style posture as we're practicing here, something that is pretty floppy. The muscles are not readily engaged, and it's being held for a good 2 minutes. Will, as I said, impact your connective tissue. And what we're doing here is actually giving a little stretch to the connective tissue in front of the lumbar spine. But what we usually feel here is compression in the low back. So you really need to make your resistance just on the mild to moderate side. It really shouldn't be the biggest thing you've ever felt in your life. And in fact, holding postures for a period of time can really create some intensity for you. So there's no need to just kind of work your way into that big resistance right away. Now, if anything becomes overwhelming for you at any time throughout this practice, you would want to just slowly back out of whatever posture you're in, including this one. I really like this posture. I know a lot of people said that they did some gardening, and this is one of my favorites after coming in from the garden. It's not a preventative thing like strengthening your back before going out to the garden. But when you come back in, when you're working in a garden, there's almost nothing you can do that doesn't have you folding forward. And oftentimes we come up and out of our work in those situations, and we feel like the low back just needs to be stretched, when in fact it's been folded forward and stretched forward so much, it's already been stretched quite a bit. So what happens when you hold a posture for a period of time and it starts to impact the connective tissue? Connective tissue is very slow to move. That's why we need the long holds. So it's slow to lengthen and it's slow to shorten. So when you fold it forward for a long period of time, no matter how hard you try to maintain good form, sometimes we just get a little over lengthened back there. And that's why if, for example, you are in a standing forward fold weeding for a long period of time, when you stand up, the first thing we oftentimes feel like doing is stretching the low back. That is very well your connective tissue just being really slow to shorten. It feels kind of stiff and vulnerable. So this posture is a nice, gentle way to reclaim the natural curve in your lumbar spine. We're going to start to back our way out of this. Because the tissues are very slow to move, you're going to want to move quite slowly here, and just be aware that, yeah, you might feel kind of vulnerable in the low back, so not pushing it any faster than it wants to go. So if you have a block underneath you, you're going to want to pull that out, and then just let the elbows widen out a little at a time. Maybe walking the arms forward if that's more appropriate, but ever so slowly, letting yourself return to that flat lying position. You can have your arms up, head turned to the side or forehead down as you prefer. Take some nice deep breaths here, so focus on a nice belly breath. As you inhale and kind of inflate the belly a little bit, that's going to just neutralize the low back, or get it started at least. Now when you're ready, there's no real rush, but when you're ready, you can kind of get your arms underneath you, tuck the toes under perhaps, press down through the limbs, and you will need to engage your core to support yourself from underneath. Just pressing your way up, and if it feels suitable, pressing the hips back toward the heels, just taking a child's pose fairly briefly. So again, balancing out your movement so the curve in the spine can feel more neutralized rather than being excessive in one direction or the other.